Good morning, all. This is our County of Santa Clara Federal Affairs Advocacy Task Force. And I note that we are formally noticed also as our Health and Hospital Committee for Brown Act compliance reasons, since Supervisor Lee and I sit on that committee as well. But for today's purposes, we are going to call this a meeting of our Federal Affairs Advocacy Task Force meeting, and a couple of quick housekeeping notes before I even call us formally to order. First, I noticed that there is a shiny new gavel, and I'm going to put it aside because I think this throng can be managed without the banging the gavel. The second thing is I have my cell phone with me, and in violation of several protocols, I'm sure it is on, so please forgive me if my phone rings and I have to step away, trying to manage some out-of-building issues. And the last thing is, I understand we have some time constraints today, so we're going to try and move this along relatively expeditiously today, and if folks can help with that, that would be well received and much appreciated as well. We'll shoot for an hour instead of an hour and a half. All right, that being said, good morning. We are going to officially call the meeting to order, and that entails looking to our clerk and asking the clerk to call the roll and establish the presence of a quorum.
All right. Vice Chairperson Lee
Good morning, Present.
and Chairperson Simitian.
Simidian present as well. Thank you.
Thank you. You have
That
a
takes us
quorum.
to public comment. Public comment is that portion of our agenda set aside for comment by members of the public on non-agendized items properly within the jurisdiction of this committee. Do we have any speakers on public comment?
We do not have any requests to speak, whether online or in person.
Thank you. That takes us then to item number 3, which is to approve the consent calendar. And I don't think we have a consent calendar this week, if I'm reading correctly.
That is correct. There are currently no items, but this is the portion wherein if you wanted to move any items, you can move them to the consent calendar.
Thank you. Supervisor Lee, can I just ask for a motion to approve the agenda as contained in our published packet?
So moved.
Motion by Lee, second by Simidian. Call the roll.
Okay. Vice Chairperson Lee
Aye.
and Chairperson Simitian.
Aye. And
Thank you.
forgive me,
That
I should have
motion-
asked if we had any speakers on our non-existent consent calendar.
There are currently no requests to speak.
Thank you. All right. That then takes us to item number 4, which is verbal reports from the chair and the vice chair relating to items of interest to the task force. Supervisor Lee, anything in particular?
I just want to mention the reason we are wearing denims today is because of the Denim Day. We are trying to commemorate this ruling from a judge in Italy one time that says that a woman wearing jeans could not be raped because the jeans are just too tight. And this is, of course, ridiculous, and that's the impetus of how this day became, and so that's why we're definitely wearing that in support of women victims and supporting women's rights on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will just ask, give a heads up to whoever is presenting today, if we could get some information about the prospects for the tax bill that the House passed. I think it was in late January, but that appears to be stuck in the Senate. I would appreciate that. So for whoever is weighing in, and if it turns out we can't get that information today, we can certainly get it offline in an off-agenda report, but I do think be helpful and important given the fact that the child tax credit provision is in that bill, as well as a number of tax issues for businesses and small businesses in particular, and then not least the housing tax credits that are important. So there are a number of elements there that are of significance or importance in terms of the work we do here at the county. All right. There is no action there for a vote, so I'm just going to move right along to item number 5, which is to receive the report from the Office of the County Council relating to items of interest to the task force, including an update on the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine versus the FDA regarding mifepristone, as well as the County of Santa Clara and others versus FCC and USA regarding net neutrality. So, Mr. Press, do I look to you on this one?
Yes, I'll be doing just a quick recap of some U.S. Supreme Court matters and then turn it over to my colleague Ravi Rajendra, who will address net neutrality.
Thank you.
As he's our expert on that. So just on the FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, and just for the public's benefit, this is a case that is now in the Supreme Court, and it concerns the FDA's approval of mifepristone in the year 2000, and then some dispensing changes that the FDA imposed in 2016 and 2021. And in essence, this was challenged below. A Texas district court enjoined the original year 2000 FDA approval of mifepristone, as well as the dispensing changes in subsequent years that, if left to stand, would have completely taken mifepristone off of the market, dramatically changing how medication abortions would go forward in this entire country. As you may recall, this board directed and the county council filed amicus briefs all along the way at the Fifth Circuit to get the matter heard by the Supreme Court, and then on the merits, as we say, in the Supreme Court. So it finally, the Supreme Court, by the way, put in a stay of that district court order last year. And so, as I have said now for many meetings, the key takeaway for everyone listening is to realize that until the Supreme Court rules, the status quo is still in place, meaning that mifepristone is available to the same degree it was today as it was a year ago, 2 years ago. The update is that the U.S. Supreme Court did have its oral argument on March 26th. It's a really quite a fascinating oral argument. It's difficult to do a head count from the different questions and comments that the justices made. It does appear, though, that there is some significant concern on behalf of many members of the Supreme Court that the petitioners, physicians who do not prescribe mifepristone, do not treat patients that have taken mifepristone, that they lacked standing. So there's a good chance, I think, that this case could simply be kicked back for lack of standing. So that would be quite a development. Again, very difficult to predict, especially with this court, and oral arguments for this term of the U.S. Supreme Court end tomorrow. And so we are still waiting for this decision. And as we know from, decades past, the decisions typically issue by the end of June or sometimes in early July if the court issues additional opinion days, as we call it. So that's the mifepristone case. Any questions on that?
When you mentioned the question of being kicked out by the issue of lack of standing, which justices were asking or leaning that direction? Were those the conservative judges, or were those the more moderate liberal ones?
There was, I would say, except for maybe Justice Alito and Thomas, there was some concern, frankly, expressed by a lot of the justices, although some of the more conservative justices, I think their way of getting to a level of comfort with hopefully landing on a lack of standing angle on all of this is that they kept repeatedly asking the Solicitor General to confirm, which the Solicitor General did, that the federal conscience protections protected physicians. If a physician does not want to be involved in any aspect of providing abortion care, they can simply make that declaration to the hospital and have nothing to do with it. So in other words, the argument would be, what possible relief could these physicians want beyond being able to just completely opt out of having anything to do with abortion care? And so in essence, they already have the relief that they could possibly want already provided by federal law. And so what were they really asking for? They were asking for what one might call bystander relief. In other words, never mind that I'm not treating people, that I'm not prescribing. I don't like the fact that someone else is. And I think a lot of the members of the court were troubled by that. But still, we shall see.
Thank you.
Mr. Press, your answer evoked another question for me, because it occurred to me, the conscience relief exception. Can you remind me, what's the source of that privilege? Is it statutory? Is it rulemaking or regulatory? Is it case law?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that. The way that the Solicitor General described it, they called it the church laws, which makes it sound statutory. I believe it's federal statutory law, but I can get you a quick note on that.
Thank you. And I'll look to my staff to ask that I get the response to that in a timely fashion, just because I would like to sort of connect the dots in my own thinking about how that process works. All right. Anything else on that before we turn to net neutrality, Supervisor Lee, or are we good?
Well, actually, just a couple of more Supreme Court items.
Forgive me.
Just to kind of pick up a few other small threads as I was just sort of going through my notes. You may recall we also talked about the Chevron deference a few meetings ago with Loper Bright Industries and a related case called Relentless Inc. versus Department of Commerce. This is, again, about the issue of when there is a gap or silence or ambiguity in a statute, how much deference the courts are supposed to give to implementing federal agencies. There's been some significant doubt as to the continuing vitality of Chevron deference. That case was argued on January 17th of this year, and from that oral argument, it seems very clear that some sort of significant retraction of Chevron deference will likely occur. Unclear as to how much, but we're still waiting for that opinion. And then finally, just this morning, the Supreme Court heard what's called the EMTALA case. This is the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. This is a case that the board also directed the county counsel's office to file an amicus brief, which we did. And this concerns the post-Dobbs. Now there are starting to be a number of conflicts arising between federal and state law. Idaho basically said, we will only allow abortion services to be provided in an emergency context only to save the life of the mother, not if there's a significant health condition, loss of an organ. And so that runs sort of into significant conflict with EMTALA, which is federal law. And so the argument this very morning, in fact, I missed about a half an hour of it for a different meeting, so I have to go back and listen to it, but that argument occurred this morning, so I don't yet have a read on that. But again, that decision will also come out by the end of this court's term. And then just one other comment. Tomorrow is the last day of oral argument for the Supreme Court term, and that's when they're hearing the Trump presidential immunity case. So with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Ravi Rajendra, on net neutrality.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, supervisors. Ravi Rajendra, Deputy County Counsel. Under the board's leadership, the county and county fire have been involved in net neutrality for about 7 years now. Tomorrow is the day that the Federal Communications Commission will meet and adopt rules that reinstate so-called net neutrality rules at a federal level. So what net neutrality, generally speaking, refers to is a requirement that companies that provide internet services, which we call internet service providers, don't discriminate don't discriminate in their transmission of the internet communications that they're responsible for transmitting on the basis of the content or source or origin of those content. So, for example, a kind of typical example one sees is if Comcast, which owns Xfinity, the internet service provider, and also NBC Universal, including the Peacock streaming service, wanted to favor Peacock, it could make it harder to stream Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, make those more difficult to watch, more kind of blocking in the middle, in order to make more consumers prefer Peacock. That sort of practice would be unlawful under the new rules. This used to be the law of the land under the Obama administration. In 2018, the Trump administration rescinded those rules. At the board's direction, the county and county fire sued the Trump administration to block that rollback. And ultimately, we were, I would say, successful in the legal position that we took. So over the course of several years, we litigated in the Ninth Circuit and in the DC Circuit to claim that the rollback was unlawful. The reason for that is kind of the core of what we have been saying all along, which is that net neutrality is really critical for public safety. Now, these rules apply solely to mass market internet. So this is not the internet that this county building uses. It's the internet that we use in our homes, small businesses may use, but not something like Google's headquarters. But the reason that's important to governmental institutions, particularly those responsible for public safety, is that in order to serve residents, we need to communicate with them. And so it's not very helpful if we have strong access to the internet, but the people we need to speak to don't. And so all sorts of ways that the county engages with the residents happen online, both in emergencies and otherwise. One famous example that has gotten a lot of attention in the press was in 2018 when County Fire was unable to coordinate services during the Mendocino Fire Complex because Verizon Wireless throttled its wireless internet down to about 1995 modem speeds. And so County Fire couldn't access the data that it needed to figure out who to send where. But the county and County Fire use internet in all sorts of ways. We post Twitter alerts and Facebook alerts when there are severe weather events. We alert people to where there are warming centers or cooling centers. If there are active shooter events, we use the internet in all sorts of ways to communicate with residents. So when people in their home using Comcast or using, T-Mobile at-home Wi-Fi can't access that information because some internet service provider has decided we want to extract more money from Facebook, and if we don't get it, then we're not going to allow people access to Facebook, then we can't get our message out to them. People don't know where their cooling centers are, et cetera. This is not only theoretical, actually. After the Obama administration's rules were rescinded, an internet service provider in Idaho actually pulled all of its consumers' access to Facebook and Twitter in retaliation for those companies banning President Trump after the January 6th incidents. And so none of those residents knew that they had been blocked, and none of them knew that it was their internet service provider that had done so in kind of political retaliation. So because the Trump administration had rescinded the rules, that was not unlawful, but it would have been unlawful under the rules that will be adopted tomorrow. In the meantime, again, with the board's leadership, we supported California, which adopted its own net neutrality law in the vacuum left by the FCC under the Trump administration, and we successfully helped California defend its law against challenge. So broadly speaking, what the law tomorrow will allow the FCC to do is to reinstate those rules that I've described. It will also have other benefits that are important for the county and county fire because it allows the FCC to exercise a broader kind of authority, and it also classifies internet service as essentially as a common carrier, like phone service. So new internet service providers can get access to pole attachments without getting that. Maybe a pole may be owned by Comcast, and they may say, we don't want an internet service provider to compete with us unless you pay us $1 million per pole. That's unlawful under the new rules. So there are a bunch of other ways that the economics of internet under the Trump era rules are really hostile to new entrants and really beneficial to incumbents by allowing them to build very strong barriers to entry. And so what these new rules do is allow access for new, what we call edge providers, so new websites or app developers. We at the county use these sorts of small entities all the time for public safety and other services. Those sorts of companies have greater access to the internet under these new rules, as do companies like Sonic, which of course now is a relatively large internet service provider, but several years ago was not. So these are all ways that the new rules will help Californians, residents in Santa Clara County and across the country, even though California has had its own law in place for about 2 years now. So it's nonetheless a benefit. I'd be happy to go on, but I'd ask the supervisors if they have any questions.
Thank you. Let me, because like so many of these conversations, this feels like it's been a long-running saga, so let me just try and pull a couple of touch points, if I may. What was the action by whom and when that threatened net neutrality in the first place? So let's go back to that.
Sure. So the Obama administration first instituted net neutrality laws under a different legal regime in 2010. Internet service providers then challenged that.
Excuse me, and the Obama administration did that by what vehicle?
Through rulemaking, but without doing what's called reclassification, which is describing internet as a common carrier.
And the agency or department responsible for the rulemaking was?
The Federal Communications Commission.
Okay, so FCC
Correct.
issued rules establishing net neutrality during the Obama administration.
Correct.
Then what happened that turned things sour?
Then internet service providers, concerned that they would be able to make slightly less of a profit, sued, challenging those rules as beyond the scope of the FCC's authority that it had claimed to be using. The circuit court agreed with them. In 2015, the Obama administration said, okay, then we'll go back and we'll call internet service a true common carrier service, a telecommunications service under the law. And once we do that, then we'll reinstate all the rules that the court just struck down because we didn't previously have authority. Now we have authority, we'll institute them.
And then what happened?
So we had that for 3 years. In the intervening 3 years from 2015 to 2018, there was a presidential election and a change in the FCC. So the FCC is a 5-member body. Traditionally, it's usually held on a 3-2 majority by the administration in power. So when an opening arose, the Trump administration inserted a third Republican member, and the Republican agenda was to roll back those net neutrality protections, which they did in very early 2018.
And did they roll that back by changing the rule, essentially?
Correct.
And then what happened?
So right before that happened, during the process of making that happen, the board authorized the county council to submit comments and participate in that, and also to litigate and challenge the Trump administration's rollback, which we then did. That produced litigation that lasted a year and a half, and in October of 2019, the DC Circuit, in a case called Mozilla versus FCC, which is referred to on the agenda as Santa Clara County versus FCC, agreed with the county that the rollback was arbitrary and capricious because the FCC had failed to consider public safety and how it would be impacted by the rescission of the net neutrality rules. But the court did not strike down the Trump administration's rollback. It said, you can continue your rollback, but go back and consider whether you should change your mind based on public safety considerations.
And then what happened?
And then, of course, the FCC under the Trump administration did no such thing, and they issued a rule saying we've reconsidered it and we think the private sector incentives and practices will be fine. The county and county fire, with board direction, filed various documents to challenge that decision, and the petition for reconsideration that we filed was pending when President Biden took over. During that time, the Senate obstructed President Biden's efforts to appoint a 5th member of the FCC. So the FCC, for the first 2.5 years of the Biden administration, was stuck in a 2-2 Republican majority tie, which allowed it to do a variety of things, but not to do net neutrality because that's a particularly partisan issue. The Senate finally confirmed President Biden's nominee in September of 2023, and the first item on the first agenda after she was seated was to adopt the proposed rule that the FCC tomorrow will adopt as a final rule.
So the short version would be all of this has been a function of the FCC rulings, which were favorable to net neutrality in the Obama administration, unfavorable in the Trump administration, and favorable again with the Biden administration, and a 3-2 Democratic majority on the FCC. Is that a fair summary?
That's a fair summary of the federal side of things. And then there's a state law that filled in the vacuum during the...
Before we get to the state side, were there other developments? Well, this may include the state side now that I stop and think. Were the developments, let me hold that question. Forgive me, I'm trying to take years of back and forth here in this chamber and put it all together. To what extent did our county's role have some significance in all of this, if it did? And I'm not looking for bragging rights. I'm more looking to sort of understand the extent to which our engagement is or is not significant. We have limited resources and always questions about how we should deploy them. So what was our role, if anything, substantively in terms of these changes?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question, Supervisor. So I would say it was quite substantial, and there are a couple of pieces of evidence to that effect. The first is that in the DC Circuit decision from 2019 called Mozilla versus FCC that I referred to, there was a coalition of advocates that were trying to challenge this rollback. We were not standing alone. That's why the name of the case as published is Mozilla and not County of Santa Clara. Many of them were making all sorts of challenges about how this was beyond what the statute contemplated, this and that. The county and county fire were the only entities, both in the comment stage and in the litigation stage, that were pressing the idea that the FCC had a statutory duty to consider public safety in all of the decisions that it makes. And further, that it had failed to do so when rolling back the net neutrality rules. And in order to flesh out that argument with facts and not just a kind of a legal abstraction, it was also the only evidence in the record about how net neutrality actually affects public safety. So the Mendocino Fire Complex example that I referred to was one piece of evidence. There's argument about whether that's technically a net neutrality violation, but there was also a whole bunch of other evidence that we put into the record about how our web EOC worked, and this was before COVID. So this is just in response to the many, many circumstances in which our EOC is activated. All sorts of ways in which we use social media to communicate with residents, as I'd mentioned. So this was the entirety, essentially, of the factual record upon which we could then litigate in the DC Circuit and say, you failed your statutory mandate. As it happens, the DC Circuit essentially rejected almost all other grounds for challenging the administration's rollback, the Trump administration's rollback, but agreed with us that the law requires the FCC to consider public safety in everything it does, and that it had failed to do so. And it agreed with us, and this is a quote from the case, that lives are at stake whenever public safety is involved, and that we had demonstrated through the record that the FCC should have really seriously considered it in light of the life or death circumstances that could arise. So I would say the face of the decision itself, which mentions us several times because we are the party that asserted this argument and also on which it relied in ruling that the rollback was arbitrary and capricious, I would say that our contribution was essential to that determination. With respect to the rule that we expect the FCC to adopt tomorrow, there's a draft that the FCC published several weeks ago. That draft discusses public safety in several ways. As you might expect in the intervening years after the court agreed with us, many, many people have started talking about how public safety is important and is advanced by net neutrality. The FCC itself, in its decision that we expected to adopt tomorrow, cited our comment no less than 66 times in two kind of core areas. One, in discussing our petition for reconsideration, which it said was absolutely right, and by adopting the rule that we're adopting, we're essentially giving you what you had asked for, you being the county. And also in a whole set of discussions about, more broadly, why public safety is advanced by net neutrality rules and why that is a statutory duty that they have to consider. So I would say even the record that will be continued tomorrow makes pretty clear that we are at the core of the both the legal analysis that's being used and the kind of factual concerns that drive the policy decision.
Thank you. Supervisor Lee, thank you for your patience.
No, the only thing I would like to add is truly an honor to be here when the FCC Chairman Jessica Rosenworcel was here about 3 weeks ago with the Santa Clara County Fire Department Fire Chief Kirkall, our own Chief Kirkall, having this seminar that was provided to talk about the net neutrality with many other professors from Stanford, some of the key national leaders on net neutrality and how important it really is, and specifically to how this, without which our firefighters could actually be endangered, not knowing where our victims are, where the fire engines are. This is a serious issue. This is not about, when people play politics with people's life, shame on them. Shame on them. And I think it's so important that this is going to come back, and hopefully we'll get what net neutrality really supposed to be. And I'm looking forward to this. You say tomorrow, right? It's the final rulemaking going to be voted on. So hopefully we'll be able to keep that, regardless of who's in the White House. This is absolutely important for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. And forgive me, I believe I cut you off before you were going to pivot to the state role.
Oh, that's right. So in the intervening years, California adopted a net neutrality law that attempted to basically fill the vacuum that the FCC had left by rolling back net neutrality. One thing that the Trump administration rule had done was say, not only are we pulling back our own rule, but we're doing this because we believe the private market unleashed without regulation is the best kind of vehicle for prioritizing public safety, and therefore we are going to block everyone else from adopting any sort of rule. Kind of as a blanket matter, you can't do this. And so California adopted one anyway, and both the FCC under the Trump administration and internet service providers sued California, claiming that its law was preempted by the FCC's policy of a light touch policy of non-regulation is the phrase that they used. And this proceeded to the district court, which agreed with California and disagreed with the challengers, and then to the Ninth Circuit, where we filed, with the board's direction, an amicus brief in support of California's law and against these challenges. In January of 2021, right before the Biden administration was inaugurated, the Ninth Circuit agreed with California that its law was okay, and that the FCC could not preempt the overall scope of states' general authority to regulate in this area, especially if the FCC itself was not going to adopt a rule. It couldn't then say no one else can adopt a rule here either. After the Biden administration was inaugurated and signaled that it was not going to continue to pursue this case, the internet service providers eventually dropped their challenge too, and the California's law went into effect in May of 2022.
And should I correctly infer then that the California law was stayed while all that litigation was going on?
That's correct. Forgot that sentence. So at the beginning of the challenge, California agreed with the challengers that it wouldn't try to enforce the law until the litigation was over. And so it was by agreement, rather technically than by preliminary injunction, that the law was not enforced until May of 2022. We expect there will be challenges to the federal action that takes place tomorrow, and so the fact that there will, for a time, be overlapping protections at the federal and state level, I think should not minimize the importance of the state level law. And so, we will continue to pay attention to those things and confer with the board about its directions.
Is that because the action that you anticipate tomorrow will be stayed while litigation around that action commences? Maybe, maybe not.
I think whether it is stayed, I think, depends in part on which judge is asked the question, but several industry groups have indicated that they plan to challenge the new regulation on what is now called the major questions doctrine, which is a relatively new advent of the Roberts Court that says easy questions are for the agencies, but when things seem really, really intense, we kind of assume that Congress didn't want an agency to make the decision. And so these challengers will say that net neutrality is such a large question that it couldn't possibly have been one that Congress wanted the FCC to make, and therefore the FCC didn't have the authority to make it. The extent to which that argument gets traction depends in part on how the argument is kind of phrased in the context of the relevant statute, and in part depending on how and by whom that argument is considered.
But there is at least the possibility that the court might determine that this requires legislative action rather than simple rulemaking action.
That is a possibility, yes.
What a tortured tale. All right. Anything else on this item?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me just double check. Speakers, if any?
There are currently no requests to speak.
All right. Supervisorly, that is item number 5. And if we can get a motion to receive the report,
So moved.
I will second. Ask the clerk to call the roll.
All right, Vice Chairperson Lee
Aye.
and Chairperson Simidian.
Aye.
Thank you.
And
Motion
forgive me,
passes.
Mr. Pike, I should have been thoughtful enough to acknowledge your presence here earlier in the meeting. Pleased to have Mr. Pike from Congressman Ro Khanna's office with us at the dais, and always appreciate the fact that the Congress member and you try to find time to take part in these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you,
again.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, that takes us to item number 6, a report from the Office of the County Executive relating to the federal health policy and budget landscape. Here we go. Hi, welcome. Please introduce yourselves to the committee.
Good morning, Chair Simidian and Vice Chair Lee. Monica Tong, Program Manager 3 with Intergovernmental Relations. Started in early April, so this is my first time here at this task force. Deputy County Executive David Campos is in Sacramento working on our county-sponsored bill, AB 3035, which is being heard by the Assembly Committee on Housing and Community Development today, and is available via Zoom for any questions or concerns. I'm joined here today in person by Mr. Bert Margolin of the Margolin Group, who will provide an update on the federal health policy and budget landscape, and followed by our team at Prime Policy, led by Aaron Dorton, who will provide a general update relating to the federal legislative, regulatory, and administrative climate. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Bert.
Mr. Margolin, welcome. Thank you, Ms. Tong. It's all right. We all know this is your first meeting, Mr. Margolin.
It's not, now it's working.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Let me start by reviewing the status of the federal health issue, which has the potential to have a very significant impact on Santa Clara County revenue, and that is the scheduled DSH cut, this disproportionate share hospital funding cut. These are supplemental payments that the County of Santa Clara receives. If the scheduled cut were to take effect, it would have a $30 to $40 million impact on the county budget on an annual basis. In the agreement that was reached last month for the FY24 budget, that cut was canceled for a limited time period. It's delayed to the end of the calendar year, only to the end of the calendar year, which is good news that it was delayed. It's not going to take effect, but it does mean that it will be addressed, has to be addressed again in what is an inevitable lame duck session, where almost all of the consequential budget and policy issues this year will be resolved or not. The new chair of the House Appropriations Committee has already stated on the record the obvious. This is Congressman Tom Cole of Oklahoma. He said that while Congress will be working on the FY25 budget, they'll make progress, they'll do all they can, they won't finish by September 30th, and there will have to be a continuing resolution, a CR, which puts all of these issues, the budget and these other funding questions, into a lame duck session. The other, of course, complicating factor here is the Republican House majority. Yes,
Excuse the interruption, Mr.
Certainly.
Margolin. I want to make sure I'm tracking federal budget deadlines because there is a different calendar, as I recall.
Certainly.
They're on an October to October basis as opposed.
that is correct.
So FY25 begins in October of, is it October 1st of 24?
That's correct.
And then runs through the end of September in 25?
Correct.
Okay. So the expectation is that the lame duck session will address the what I'm going to call the 24-25 budget,
Yes.
but probably won't be able to get it all pulled together. And back to you. Thank you. Now I'm tracking.
Right. And again, how successful they are in that lame duck session will depend obviously on who has been elected president, what the new incoming House and Senate majorities are, and what each party calculates its advantage or lack of same will be in resolving issues during the lame duck. We also have the razor-thin one-vote margin in the House of Representatives, with Speaker Johnson now under assault from a small group led by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. That complicates matters further. It means that anything remotely controversial is probably going to be delayed until this lame duck. Not that some things can't get done, but most issues will not be addressed. One other issue we are watching, which will have to be addressed in the lame duck, which affects Santa Clara County, is the telehealth flexibility that was adopted during COVID, which allows patients to access care from their home when needed and appropriate. This flexibility authorization has been extended once, but it also expires at the end of the calendar year. So telehealth flexibility, the dish cuts, they're all tied up with this lame duck session. The House is in recess this week, and when they come back next week, we will learn whether or not the Marjorie Taylor Greene motion to vacate will be acted on. The latest conventional wisdom, again, as of this morning, late last night, is that Speaker Johnson has strengthened his position and that it's unlikely that he'll be challenged successfully. Part of this has to do with former President Trump stating last night, once again, that he's pleased with Speaker Johnson and his performance. So it's much harder for Marjorie Taylor Greene to launch this effort if former President Trump is on the other side of the issue. Well, and I said harder, but not impossible. This one vote threshold means that she could still act on this issue if she wanted to, and there could be, again, a period of chaos in the House. That completes my report. Happy to respond to questions.
Thank you. Let me first see if we have any speakers on this item.
There are currently no requests to speak.
Thank you very much. Going to the issue of dish cuts, Mr. Margolin, all teasing about your first meeting aside, it seems to me we've been having this conversation about dish cuts for an awfully long time.
We have.
How real is the possibility that as we move into 2025, that they become a real thing as opposed to a never-ending topic of conversation?
So it's unlikely that they will become a real thing because there's bipartisan support for deferring them. And this is an example, once again, of the peculiar ways in which the Congress sometimes deals with these issues. Because every time they cancel or defer the dish cut, they have to find an offset. They have a problem terminating the dish cut and ultimately getting rid of it, which would require a much larger financial offset over many more years. So this is a logic that operates in the Congress. It doesn't make a lot of sense outside of the Congress. So therefore, they're incentivized to do these shorter-term deferrals or eliminations, find offsets that are not as large to make that occur, to make that feasible, and then move on till the next deadline and the next offset. They've done this with other issues in the past. It's not unique to DISH, and it's somewhat frustrating. But again, I think on DISH, we're not in significant jeopardy, but we do have to pay attention to it.
And forgive me, I'm clearly not tracking on a piece of this. If there were dish cuts, wouldn't that be a revenue producer for the feds and therefore not require additional cuts?
No. In this case, the dish cuts were booked as a way of paying for the Affordable Care Act. They were savings attached to back in 2010 to the Affordable Care Act. So if you take away the savings you've already booked for the Affordable Care Act, you have a cost.
I see. So the reason that a savings becomes a cost is because it's already been counted.
It's been counted, yes. I'm sorry to say.
No. So then, okay, no, now it tracks entirely. So if you undo the cut, then you have to pay for the savings you no longer are going to achieve. And did I understand you correctly to say even in the short term that is still required, but it's always easier to cobble together some savings in the short term than it is to come up with a long-term
Yes.
systemic
If
savings?
you defer it or cancel it for a year, that's less costly than 2, 3, 4 years.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That may fall into the category of I'm sorry I asked. Thank you. Let me turn to Supervisor Lee and see if he has comments or questions. All right. Thank you. All right. Anything else, folks? Ms. Tong, Mr. Margol? No?
No, that completes.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And Ms. Tong, where do we go next? Does that complete that item?
Correct.
All right, then I will ask Supervisor Lee for a motion to
So moved.
receive the report. We have that. This is for item number 6. And then we're going to go on to the larger conversation with our advisors from Prime, I believe. But right now, we have a motion from Lee, second by Simidian. Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Okay. Vice Chairperson Lee and Chairperson Simidian.
Aye.
Thank
Motion
you.
carries unanimously, and we say thanks again. All right, Ms. Tong, we're going to use you as our guide here along the path.
Yes, thank you, Chair Simidian. Joining me via Zoom today from Prime Policy, led by Aaron Dorton, and I will turn over to them at this time. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Great. Hi. Thank you all for having me. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. I'll try not to be repetitive. Mr. Mergolan has touched on a lot of the items, just generally setting the stage. So I'll do my best to skip ahead a little bit. In March, after a series of 4 continuing resolutions to fund the federal government and avert a shutdown since the beginning of the current federal fiscal year on October 1st in 2023, Congress passed and the president then signed 2 minibus appropriation bills to fund the federal government through September 30th, 2024. The first package included the agriculture, rural development, commerce, justice, science, interior environment, military construction, veterans affairs, energy and water, and transportation, housing, urban development spending bills, and that was enacted on March 8th. The second minibus, as they call it, included defense, financial services and general government, homeland security, labor, health and human services, education, legislative branch, and state and foreign operations spending bills. They were all those bills collectively were enacted on March 23rd. In total, both packages represent just over 1.6 trillion in discretionary spending across all 12 spending bills. Of this total amount, over 773 billion is non-defense discretionary spending, which closely mirrors the comparable FY 2023 level. And nearly 825 billion is in defense discretionary spending, an increase of 3.4%. In addition to regular programmatic funding and extensions, which I will get back to in a moment, FY 2024 appropriations included approximately over 14 billion in earmarks, rebranded, as we know, as community project funding and congressionally directed spending. This represents nearly 8,000 projects around the country and will provide direct federal investments to hundreds of county programs and critical infrastructure projects aimed to better serve communities. Of those projects, Santa Clara County will receive $4.116 million for the Silicon Valley African American Cultural Center project for affordable housing and expansion of cultural center, which was submitted by Representative Khanna. You will receive $1 million for emergency housing and transitional housing for homeless veterans, submitted by both Representatives Khanna and Lofgren. and 1.666 million for farm worker housing rehabilitation and electrification pilot program, which was submitted by Representative Lofgren. Additionally, the Santa Clara County Housing Authority will receive $850,000 for the revitalization of the Buena Vista Mobile Home Park community, which was submitted by Representative Eshoo as well as Senators Feinstein and Padilla. And lastly, the Santa Clara County Office of Education will receive $500,000 for affordable educator housing in Santa Clara, also submitted by Representative Connell. Now, the FY 2024 appropriations packages include several key investments of importance to Santa Clara County in the form of programmatic funding and extensions. These include, but are not limited to, sustained funding for the Community Development Block Grant Program and critical policy riders that will make it easier for counties to provide critical, mental health services to their residents. These programs and others funded through these bills will enable counties to continue providing critical service throughout the community in 2024. A few highlights, additional highlights of the larger bill are $8.75 billion for the Child Care and Development Block Grant Program, which is a $725 million increase over FY 2023. $5.7 billion for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act programs, which help counties tackle and overcome challenges facing job seekers and employers in their communities. It also includes extension of the TANF program through September 30th, 2024, and extension of the Title IV-B Child Welfare Services through December 31st of 2024. A few other items of note within each section of the bill. The agriculture section of the bill, within that there's $33.266 billion for child nutrition programs, which is an increase of $4.7 billion from FY23 and includes the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, and summer food programs. The WIC program, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, saw an increase of $1 billion from FY25, which gets them to $7.03 billion. Regarding the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development Bill, somewhat less good news. The overall bill cut $3.245 billion from FY23 levels across 19 Department of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development programs, but did maintain housing assistance for vulnerable populations such as the elderly, disabled, and veterans. Some other programmatic items to highlight for the county within that bill are the Home Investment Partnership Program is now funded at $1.25 billion, which is down about $250 million from last year. And raise grants are also down about $456 million from 2023, which is now $345. However, I mentioned earlier the community development block grants remained the same, and the homeless assistance grants are up about $418 million from last year. So they're at about $4.05 billion. Within the CJS bill, the Commerce Justice State Bill, they had some good news. They saw increased DEA funding to expand efforts to combat fentanyl. The Office of Violence Against Women saw an increase of $14 million. The Office of Justice Programs saw an increase of $62.3 million. And the Victims of Trafficking Programs saw a slight increase also to reach $98.8 million. And lastly, regarding some veterans programs, the Veterans Mental Health Program saw an increase of $2.34 billion, and the Veterans Home Assistance Program saw an increase of $414 million. Now, just before I wrap up, just a few quick notes regarding FY25 appropriations, which I know Mr. Margolin already touched on. Due to the prolonged process, the Senate has just released its guidelines and deadlines for the coming cycle. and they remain largely the same from the 117th Congress. I'll just note one date: since this past year, the county's directed spending all came from the Transportation HUD bill. This year, that subcommittee's deadline for submissions from senators is May 13th. The House, again, as Mr. Margolin pointed out, is delayed even further due to the retirement of the chairperson, Chairwoman Granger, and the new chair, Tom Cole, has only released some guidance for programmatic and language requests, but has yet to give any specifics or parameters for community project funding. So that's all I have for today. I'm happy to provide any of this information in writing because I know it was a lot of numbers, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Rich Mead to tell us a little bit about the tax bill as requested.
Before we go to Mr. Mead, thank you, Ms. Dorton. Let me just ask you to cover some ground again. So where does that leave us on the issue of community project funding and timing and process? And I'm looking at Ms. Tong, who's new to her role here. So so where are we?
So the Senate. So each office is going to have a different deadline, but the Senate I believe it was just Friday, if I'm not mistaken, the Senate Appropriations Committee put out what their internal deadlines are for the senator to then say, okay, once I've received all of my applications and then the ones I'm going to do, I turn over to the committee. They just put those out. Now each Senate office is going to have a different deadline, but so that has begun to be in process and they're already underway. The House, we don't have the information yet from the House because the chairman is brand new, so, and he wants to put his own stamp on this, for lack of a better way to describe it. So we don't have any deadlines yet, and we have very limited guidelines to this point.
I see Mr. Pike leaning in here from Congressman Khanna's office. Mr. Pike, do you have an inkling or more?
Yeah, and I did want to thank Ms. Graff for highlighting some of the projects that did come in. I was in touch with our legislative director this morning, and we're being told that, it will definitely go ahead. There will be community project funding for fiscal year 25. Cole has been, they're not expecting an extensive revamp, but weighing potentially some changes, including perhaps borrowing nonprofit organizations from getting HUD funds. So we'll have to see if, they go even further than they did last year. I think best case scenario might be same rules, but we have not received any guidelines specifically yet or time frame.
If I may, Supervisor Samitian, Mr. Chair, this is David Campos here from Sacramento. Just wanted to let you know that given the lack of guidance and uncertainty, we have actually started the process internally of asking departments to work with us closely to develop the budget requests. So we're in the process of doing that so that when the deadlines are presented and the guideline is presented, we are ready to submit. And so we are in the process of working that in anticipation of some of the chaos that's happening in DC.
Got it. Thank you. Let me go back to the folks at Prime. And Ms. Dorton, which name do you prefer to be called, if I may?
Dorton is fine because it's easier to say. Let's just stick with that one. I should someday get it changed.
No, it's all good. So, Ms. Dorton, is that okay? Dorton is fine? Thank you. Let me just ask a question. In trying to wrap my arms around this process as it has evolved over time, I took the somewhat simplistic approach of taking the $14 billion number that you articulated, I think, a bit earlier, dividing it by 435, knowing that there are 435 districts in the House, and also knowing that presumably some members fare better than others in the process, and came up with a $32 million a district average Does that sound about right, either in terms of what members are able to seek out on behalf of their district needs? Mr. Pikes, does that sound right to you, Ms. Dorton?
Well, that number seems high to me. And I do know that there are some specific projects, for example, if they relate to military facilities and things like that. I know Representative Lofgren was able to get like a $40 million project related to that. I kind of highlighted that to our staff. Gee, how'd that happen? Why can't we get that much money? And it relates to kind of like separate things like that maybe.
Is there a number you would toss out as a more typical or normative number? 20 million, 10 million?
I think maybe Ms. Jordan has a broader view on that than I do.
So I know that there's a specific, each office can only submit a certain number, and off the top of my head, I'm not
15.
remembering what
Yeah,
that
it's
is.
15.
15, okay. So there's that, and then I do think that number that you came up with, Supervisor Smithian, is pretty high. But I think we can probably do a little digging and get you some more information on that.
Sure, and not a lot. I just,
Yeah.
you know, we have a lot of discussions here at our board about differing needs in differing communities. And every one of the 435 House districts is, of course, a unique place. We also, one of the things that I have observed over time is that, as simple or simplistic as it may seem, the number of different cities and towns in a district has an impact, because if there are 2 cities and towns, you're working with a couple of folks. If you've got 20 cities and towns, even though presumably they're smaller, they all say, well, we've got needs too. So sure, if we could just ask for a brief off agenda on this, and again, I'll look to my staff to make sure that I see it in a timely fashion. I'm just curious, as I say, because
No
I
problem.
think for our county staff, and I guess I'm looking at Ms. Tong here and the disembodied voice of Mr. Campos, I think knowing what reasonable expectations are is an important part of being thoughtful in terms of making these requests.
Yeah, and I should say that our total funding for last year is about 15 million.
15 million in the district. Okay, thank you.
In our district.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Anything else before we finally let you get us to Mr. Mead? I'm the one who said we needed to move it along, and then I'm the one who delayed it. So, Mr. Mead, what can you tell us about that tax bill? Thank you, Ms. Dorton.
Thank you, Supervisor Smithian. Let me start by saying the Republican chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jason Smith from Missouri, and the Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon, negotiated a bipartisan tax bill. The challenge was that it was really those 2 chairs that were most invested in it, and they didn't necessarily fully engage the ranking members on either committee. Now, that wasn't an issue in the House because the tax bill, which, as you mentioned, included an extension of the popular child tax credit and some other popular business tax provisions, passed overwhelmingly on January 31st by a vote of 357 to 70. The bill went over to the Senate, and while there's some Republican senators who are supporting it, the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Crapo from Idaho, is opposed to it. He cites sort of 2 reasons for it, but I think there's a broader reason in that his reasons for citing it is he thinks the child tax credit is too generous, number one, and then the offset they're using to pay for these tax provisions, he questions the validity of using that as an offset. But I think the bigger issue is I think he is looking ahead to next Congress, where he anticipates that there's a decent chance he will no longer be the ranking member and rather the chair of the committee, and therefore why negotiate tax provisions now as ranking member when a year from now he can be the chair. So I wouldn't say, you never, in my opinion, in Washington, you never say anything is dead because you never know what may happen to it. But the tax bill in the Senate, I would say, is probably on life support. You've got a few Republican senators who have voiced support for it, but probably not enough to get to the 60 vote threshold that'd be needed to pass it. Now, Senator Schumer may still call up the tax bill to have a vote on it to sort of flush out who's for it and who's against it, and have what we call a test vote on it. But the chances of it getting to 60 and passing and being signed into law this year are fairly remote. So with that, let me turn to any questions you may have about that.
Thank you. I guess the question I would ask is, if I understood you correctly, Senator Crapo is the ranking member in the committee as the Senate is now constituted, is hopeful that he'll be the chair of the committee in the next session of Congress. And does that, what would that, if that were to be the case, what are the prospects then for this bill in a new Congress? Let me try it that way.
I think, I would say this. I think that many of the elements of this bill could move forward in the next Congress because there's a lot of support for the child tax credit, particularly with Democratic members of Congress. And therefore, if you're going to try and move a tax bill on a bipartisan basis, it makes sense to have that sort of trade-off, if you will, of having the child tax credit to help draw in Democratic votes and some business provisions to help draw in Republican votes. So another version of this tax bill is certainly a possibility in the next Congress with, if Senator Crapo is the chair, he would write it. Now, he may make some modifications, as I said, that he thinks that the current version is a little too generous on the child tax credit. He may tighten it up some, but it's very likely that a version of the child tax credit with business incentives would move forward in the next Congress.
So to grossly oversimplify, he may be inclined to think that if he was the chair and had a majority, he could cut a better deal from his point of view.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's a very helpful recap because I think it's a significant piece of legislation, and have been curious to know what happened after all the fanfare about that bipartisan vote in late January. Supervisor Lee, any comments or questions on any of the report from the folks at Prime or our own county staff? No? All right, let me see if we have any comments or from folks online.
There are currently no requests to speak.
All right, and no one here in the chambers either. All right, then I will say thank you and simply ask Supervisor Lee if he is prepared to offer a motion to receive the report. Motion by Lee, second by Simidian. Let's call the roll.
Vice Chairperson Lee?
Aye.
And Chairperson Simidian?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Felt like we got caught up quite well today. Thank you. And without objection and hearing none, we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is Wednesday, June the 26th at 1 p.m. in these very same chambers. Thank you all and have a good day.